If your garden feels a little quiet, you might be missing one simple thing: the birds. The truth is, it's not that complicated, but it does require intention. They're constantly evaluating four things: food, water, shelter, and safety. Even if one of those things is missing, they won't stay. And in many cases, they won't even land. So instead of guessing, today we're going to break this down step by step, not just how to attract birds, but how to turn your garden into a place that they recognize as a safe place to be. Food is usually the first contact point between your garden and them. But here's where a lot of people go wrong. They think that one bird feeder is a one-size-fits-all. But in reality, different birds are adapted to different food sources. Black oil sunflower seeds are one of the most versatile options you can use. They're high in fat, easy to open, and attract a wide range of species like chickadees, finches, and nuthatches. If you want to bring in birds like woodpeckers, adding suet makes a huge difference, especially in colder months when birds need concentrated energy sources. Niger seed is more specialized, but if you're targeting finches, it's one of the most effective ways to attract them consistently. And then there's nectar. Hummingbirds are incredibly efficient at finding food sources, but they're also selective. A clean, consistent nectar feeder can turn your garden into a regular stop on their routine. So here's the key shift. Feeders attract birds, but they don't necessarily build loyalty. For that, we need to go a bit deeper. If your garden has food but still feels kind of quiet, you're missing one important thing: water. Birds rely on water daily, not just for drinking, but also maintaining their feathers. Clean feathers are essential for flight and insulation. A shallow bird bath is a great starting point, but details matter more than most people recognize. Depth is critical. Most birds prefer water that's no deeper than a few centimeters. If it's too deep, they won't use it, and water circulation matters as well. A small dripper, bubbler, or fountain creates ripples and sound that birds can detect from a distance. Moving water signals freshness, and that alone can dramatically increase activity. And if you live in a colder region, keeping water available in winter can make your garden one of the few reliable resources in the area. That's when birds don't just visit, they depend on it. Food brings the birds in, shelter decides whether they'll stay or not. Birds are constantly scanning for danger. If your garden feels exposed, they won't spend more than a few seconds there. This is where most gardens fall short. Open lawns, isolated plants, and lack of structure makes birds feel vulnerable. What they're looking for is layering. Trees for height, shrubs for cover, lower plants for movement. Dense shrubs are especially important because they offer immediate protection. If a bird can't dive into cover quickly, it won't risk staying out there in the open. Evergreens take this even further by providing year-round shelter, especially in winter. This is the difference between a garden that birds visit and a garden that birds trust. And if this kind of practical step-by-step guide is good for you, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more. Sometimes the issue isn't what you're missing, but what's pushing them away. Window collisions are one of the biggest hidden threats. Birds don't recognize reflections as barriers, and even a well-designed garden can become dangerous without simple fixes. Pets, especially cats, create constant pressure. Even their presence alone can reduce bird activity significantly. And then there's pesticides. Removing insects might seem like a good garden care, but it removes a critical food source, especially during nesting season when birds rely heavily on protein. And if you're planning on building a garden that supports real wildlife, be sure to check out our online store where we have a huge selection of seeds and perennials that are ready to ship across country so you can build that beautiful bird habitat that you and the birds will enjoy. Now, this is where everything starts to connect. So up to this point, we've talked about food, water, shelter, and safety, but plants is where all those things come together in place. A feeder gives the birds a quick meal, but a plant gives them reason to return. And more importantly, different plants attract different types of birds based on how birds are adapted to feed. Some birds are built to eat berries, some are built to crack seeds, and some rely most entirely on nectar, and others depend on insects. So when you choose plants, you're not just adding greenery, you're choosing which birds you want to invite to your garden. Let's talk about berry-producing shrubs. Plants like serviceberry, elderberry, dogwood, and salal are incredibly valuable because they provide food at key times of the year. Serviceberry, for example, is one of the earliest fruiting plants, which makes it especially important for birds like robins and cedar waxwings coming out of winter. Elderberry produces large clusters of fruit that attract a wide variety of birds, from songbirds to larger larger species. Dogwood adds another layer, not just berries, but for structure and shelter. And salal, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is one of the most reliable native food sources available. These plants don't just attract birds, they support them all season long. Now let's talk about seed-producing flowers. This is one of the most overlooked strategies. If you leave plants like coneflower, black-eyed Susan, and sunflower standing instead of cutting them back, they become natural feeding stations. Goldfinches are especially drawn to coneflowers. You'll often see them perched directly on the seed heads, feeding in a way that feels much more natural than any feeder. Ornamental grasses also play a role here, not just for seeds, but for cover. Now hummingbirds. If you want them in your garden, plant choice matters a lot. They're drawn to bright colors and tubular flowers, so plants like salvia, columbine, and bee balm are incredibly effective. Salvia, in particular, is one of the easiest and most reliable ways to attract them consistently. And once hummingbirds find a reliable food source, they tend to return again and again. Now, shelter plants. Evergreens, dense shrubs, and hedges don't just attract birds, they create a safe environment for species like sparrows, chickadees, and juncos. These birds rely heavily on cover, especially in colder months or areas with predators. And finally, native plants. Native plants support native insects, and those insects become food for birds, especially during nesting season. So even if the plant isn't directly feeding the birds with seeds or berries, it may be supporting them indirectly. If you support insects, you support birds. So to fully master bird attraction, you have to really think beyond the summer months. A great garden sanctuary functions like a high-end hotel that changes its menu and services based on the season. In the spring, your garden should be a nursery, providing soft caterpillars found on native oaks and cherries that parent birds need to feed their chicks. As we move into summer, it becomes a cooling station where fresh, moving water is the main draw for birds trying to escape the heat. The real shift happens in the fall and winter. This is when birds are either fueling up for a 1,000-mile migration or trying to survive sub-zero temperatures. So instead of a neat garden, birds need a functional garden. By leaving your fallen leaves on the ground instead of raking them away, you create a foraging floor where birds like juncos and towhees can hunt for protein-rich larvae hidden in the leaf litter. In the dead of winter, providing a high-fat suet and keeping your bird bath de-iced turns your home into a literal lifesaver. When you plan for the full year, your garden becomes a permanent landmark on their migratory map. Birds learn. They remember where the food is reliable, the water is clean and flowing, and they feel safe. And once they trust your garden, they come back, not randomly, but consistently. And that's when everything changes. It stops from being quiet to being alive. If you want a garden that just doesn't look good but feels alive, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let us know in the comments below what kind of birds are you looking to have show up in your backyard. I'm sure it's not a seagull.